really like how they have a completely different I mean, it wasn't until the 80s until like so that just sums it up.
Oh, did you really? Oh, that's great. That must have been
Yeah, you know, good.
Hey, Donald, someone brought Trump Tower. What?
Just ask everybody to take everything out of your pockets.
What so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous flight, for the rappers we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bomb bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Home of the Patriots. All right. First of all, thank you all for being here today. If you haven't seen it, there's a big, huge crowd outside that can't get in. You can sit down for me, believe me. You'll be standing up for the
hear from some really incredible public servants in just a moment. But before we do, I am here to remind everyone that we are, of course, just one day out from Super Tuesday. It's tomorrow. Yep, and it's very important. We need all of your help talking to as many undecided voters as possible between today and tomorrow.
gives me great honor to welcome to the stage Mayor Marty Walsh and the next President of the United States.
First of all, say how great is our Attorney General of Massachusetts. Thank you very much. And I want to, I'm not going to acknowledge everyone, but I want to thank all the elected officials that are here, because there's a lot here, and if I start naming, I'll get in trouble. I want to thank you all. I want to thank all the congressmen and the senators and the representatives and the councils and the mayors and the clerks and everyone that's here today. Thank you so much. I'm going to, my job today isn't to quite honestly, what the Attorney General has done. She's already made the case. We already know the case. My job is to pass a message along to you. We had a great Saturday. It was an unbelievable Saturday. And we're going to have a great Tuesday as well in this campaign. We just need to make sure when we're watching those results tomorrow night, and whatever we watch them on, that we see Massachusetts do the right thing tomorrow night. And the way that happens is by all of us, when we leave here today, to don't go home and go on with your life, but to get involved in the campaign. That means if you haven't knocked the door, or you haven't made a phone call, go in your phone book, knock your neighbor's doors, and let them know what's at stake in this election, and how important it is for us to make sure that we win our state tomorrow. That's what this is all about. And don't leave any door unlocked, because the last thing you want to do is wake up Wednesday morning and say, I should have knocked the door. Because that's not what we do in Massachusetts. What we do in Massachusetts, we win. We win. We know how important this election is. And it's my honor to introduce to you the woman who is not only going to win Massachusetts tomorrow, but the next president of the United States of America.
Officials and all of you who are really focused on making sure we keep the progress going in America. I have to thank all the people outside. I don't know that they can hear me, but I want them to know I'm overwhelmed by the crowd outside. I can't get them in here, but I was so pleased to see them, and I hope they're also going to follow the mayor's request and work hard between now and the time the polls close tomorrow, because I'll tell you, the stakes couldn't be higher, right? I think as this election, this campaign has gone on, and people have heard what the leading candidates on the Republican side are saying, more and more people are really focused on making sure that we reject the kind of mean-spiritedness, the demagoguery, the bigotry that is being peddled by the Republican candidates. You know, America never stopped being great. We need to make America whole. And the way we will do that is to break down all the barriers. The barriers that stand in the way of America living up to its potential and every single American living up to his or hers. That's what my campaign is about. You know, when I came to college here at Wellesley College, back I fell in love with Wellesley and I fell in love with Boston. And when I left you for a little while to go to law school somewhere else, and when I graduated and I joined the Children's Defense Fund, back I came. And I had the most extraordinary experience because, for me, knocking down barriers that stand in the way of our youngest citizens has to be our first and highest priority. So, when I went to New Bedford, Massachusetts, I see my friend Mark Pacheco there. I was looking for kids who weren't in school because they had disabilities. Remember, back then there was no law which said you had to educate a child with disabilities. And so when you knocked down doors like I did, and like hundreds and hundreds of people like me across America were doing, we were trying to gather the evidence to present to the Congress to say, this isn't right in America. And I met children. I'll never forget being on the back small porch under a grape arbor in a little house in New Bedford with a girl, a teenage girl in a wheelchair. She wanted more than anything to go to school. But in those days, there was no accommodation for her. And thanks to the work we did right here in Massachusetts, that changed. And the United States became the first country in the world to say, every child deserves an education. And then when I became a young lawyer working again for the Children's Defense Fund, I went to South Carolina. Again, to gather information and evidence, to bring a lawsuit against that state because they were housing juveniles with adults in adult prisons. And we were successful, but it should never have happened in the first place. And then I went to Alabama. I went undercover that time to try to gather information about communities that were setting up what can be called segregated academies to avoid integrating the public schools, and we're looking for tax-exempt status to be able to afford to do so. Those are some of my earliest experiences understanding the barriers that stand in the way of our fellow men and women. And it just lit a spark in me that because I had a good education. You know, I didn't have anything to do with picking my parents or deciding I was going to be born in the United States. But boy, did I luck out on both counts. Because I had not only a strong family, but I had the backing of my country. At least that's the way it felt to me. Despite all our problems, all the barriers, we always believed that it would get better, that we would keep opening the doors of opportunity, keep expanding the circle of rights, and that's what we have done. Not as fast as many of us would have wanted, but we kept moving forward. This election, as much as any in my memory, will test that proposition. Because there is, make no mistake about it, a very strong force that wants to turn us back. So I really hope that we will not only understand what's at stake, but as the mayor said, tell everybody you can reach, because this touches everybody. Think of those barriers. We have economic barriers, don't we? Barriers where we don't have enough good jobs with rising incomes. We need to get back to a win-win economy. Now, it wasn't so long ago that we had that. Back in the 1990s, when another Democrat was president of the United States. We had 23 million new jobs created, the most peacetime era of our nation. But more than that, incomes went up for everybody, not just people at the top. Middle-class families, working families, poor families. The median family income in America went up 17%. The median family income for African-American families went up 33%. And we lifted more people out of poverty than at any time. Why? Because nothing beats a good job with a rising income. Our roads, our bridges, our tunnels, our ports, our airports. And let's not forget what we can't see, especially in older cities like this one, but others across the north of our country primarily. Think about Flint, Michigan, a city of 100,000 people, predominantly poor and African American, where the people there were drinking lead-contaminated water for nearly 2 years. They complained. They brought that dirty, smelly water to show to authorities to say something's wrong. And they were just brushed aside. And nobody did anything until finally some doctors began to test the amount of lead in the blood of babies and children. That should never have happened anywhere in America, my friends. We've got to pull together. A child in Flint is just as precious as a child in Boston or manufacturing to America by changing the tax code. Instead of getting a tax benefit for exporting jobs, you'll get it if you bring them back. You'll put them in Massachusetts or somewhere else in our country. I believe we can build things again. And I'll tell you, one of the best ways for us to create jobs is by combating climate change with clean, renewable energy. Be asked, well, what about climate change? You've heard their answer. Well, I don't know, I'm not a scientist. Now, there's the easiest way in the world to remedy that. Go talk to a scientist. There are a bunch of them. Cambridge, throughout this state. You see, I've concluded that they don't really believe that. They know better, but they're taking orders from the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers have basically said, don't you dare acknowledge climate change is real. Now that's bad enough. But what really is upsetting is think of the jobs we can create by investing in clean, renewable energy. I want to set some big goals. I want us to deploy 500 million more solar panels by the end of my first term. And enough clean energy. Especially for young people. Everywhere I go, young Americans tell me they want to start a small business. And for minority and women-owned small businesses, and let's raise the federal minimum wage. You should not be working full-time and still be accommodated. And finally, let's guarantee equal pay for women's work. Infrastructure, or manufacturing, or clean energy. They don't believe in raising the minimum wage, and this whole thing about equal pay, they just don't even admit it's real. So that's going to be a big issue in this campaign. And they're going to try to sell the American people the same snake oil they've sold before. Trickle-down economics, you've heard it before, and we've seen it before. You know, when I joined the Senate in 2001, it was under a Republican president. And I thought we were on the right track at the end of Bill's administration. And as soon as I got to the Senate, I realized This new administration wanted to dismantle all of it. And boy, they did a good job, didn't they? Slash taxes on the wealthy, get out of the way of regulating Wall Street or the mortgage market, and we saw what happened. The worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. You know, in 2008, right after the election, President-elect Obama called, asked me to come to Chicago. I didn't know why. It turned out he wanted to ask me to be Secretary of State, but before we got to that, he just looked at me and he said, "It is so much worse than they told us." I want you to remember this because I am going to talk about this every day. If I'm so fortunate enough to be the nominee, the first day that's secured, I'm going to talk about this until the November election. We were losing 800,000 jobs a month. 9 million Americans lost their jobs. 5 million homes lost. $13 trillion in family wealth wiped out. That's what our new Democratic president inherited. And I don't think President Obama gets the credit he deserves for making sure. But I'll say this for the Republicans. They are persistent because they're back with the same economic policy. Persistently wrong, but they don't quit. So it's going to be up to us to point out to the American people what the differences are and what the stakes are for every single working American. We're also going to have to defend the Affordable Care Act and make sure we improve it and extend it. The Republicans have been trying to repeal it. They've now voted to repeal it 63 times, but you know they never tell you what they'll replace it with. They can't tell you because you know what? It's just going to turn our health insurance back to the insurance companies. No rules, no limits. So if you have a pre-existing condition, man, it's going to be hard to get insurance again. If you're a woman, we're going to pay more for our health care than men. If you're a young person, no guarantee you can be on your parents' policy if they have one until you're 26. Everywhere I go campaigning, somebody will say to me, "Thank you for defending the Affordable Care Act," and then they'll tell me a story. The other day in South Carolina, a woman said that to me. I said, "Why do you say that?" She said, "Well, I'll tell you." She said, "I've always worked, but I couldn't afford insurance. I didn't have an employer who helped me. I made too much money to be eligible for any other kind of help." She said, "So I just went without medical care for years." And she said, "Then the Affordable Care Act came along, and I thought maybe I should sign on to that," and I did. And I've been having headaches, and I finally went to the doctor for the first time. And the doctor said, "You have brain cancer. Good thing you came." And she just looked at me and she said, "You know, I think I'm going to be okay. But I could have died because I didn't know there was anything wrong with me because I couldn't afford insurance." So we've got to defend what we have achieved. We've got to go further, get costs down, get more competition, and boy, do we have to go after the prescription drug companies that are raising the cost of prescription drugs. And we also have to knock down the barriers to good education. We got to make sure that it doesn't matter where you live, you are entitled to a first-class education. And I think the federal government has to do what it can to help equalize spending, to provide more support for poor districts that educate poor kids. Because those kids deserve just as much of a chance to see what they can achieve as any kid we know, including my grandchild. They deserve primarily a state and local responsibility. That's why our system is set up. I visited schools in South Carolina that were heartbreaking. You know, when I was a first lady in Arkansas and in the United States, when I was a senator, I used to have what I called the Chelsea test. Would I send my daughter there? And I went to some great public schools. Great public schools in poor areas as well as well-off areas. but I went to some really struggling public schools that didn't have equipment. Their building was literally falling down. They didn't have enough teachers to teach all the subjects. So now I'm using the Charlotte test. That's my granddaughter's name. But I said my granddaughter. I think anybody in public life should think of a child you care about, your own, a niece, a nephew, some child you care about, and apply that test. And if the answer is no, then let's do something about it. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to be able to refinance your student debt. If you can refinance your house or your car, don't you think you ought to be able to refinance your student debt? And then we're going to switch as many people as we can who want to go into what's called contingency repayment. You know, the Congress members know about this because they've been working with President Obama to extend this. In other words, pay it back as a percentage of your income, not as a fixed interest rate. Anybody here with student debt? Anybody here with higher than a 10% interest rate? What's your interest rate? Oh, come on. You have the new record of everybody I've asked. Anybody else higher than 10%? Yes, what's yours? 14? I just want everybody who isn't in this situation to think with me for a minute. We haven't had interest rates that high for decades. What on earth are we doing imposing 14% interest rates, or for that matter, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6? What are we doing having our young people burdened by that kind of debt? This is wrong. And it's the only part of our economy that is being taken advantage of like that. And so we're going to end it. We're going to have you pay it back as a percentage of your income. That's what I got to do when I got out of law school. And the federal government should not be making money off of lending money to students. It should be an investment. Now there's a lot of other work to do in our country. We know that. And every time I listen to the Republicans, I know we have to fight hard for our rights, our values that started right here in Boston. You know, I don't know what our founders or those early patriots would think about some of what we're up against today. I wonder what they would think about an American company like Johnson Controls, based in Wisconsin, an auto parts company that when the economy was going down, 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 and it looked like the auto industry was going down with it. Auto companies and parts companies, they came to Washington. They asked for help. Republicans basically said, forget it, let those millions of jobs just die. The president, the Democrats in Congress said, right? They said, okay, we will help you. And we did. It turned out to be a good deal because they paid it back ahead of time. So we saved a company called Johnson Controls. I wonder what the founders would think to know that after our government, our taxpayers do that, this company wants to move to Europe to avoid paying taxes to the very government and country that saved their business. Or what about Valiant Pharmaceuticals, which buys up small little drug companies, gets a hold of that drug, and then raises the price, sometimes 5,000%, for the simple reason for greed. Now, I don't think we'll be dumping pharmaceuticals in Boston Harbor, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to use every tool at my disposal to go after companies like this that turn their back on America. To our unions, to our workers. They literally want to turn the clock back, to deprive people of the right to negotiate and bargain for better working conditions as well as pay. I'm going to go to bat for unions and workers because that helped to build the American middle class. Washington, you can name them. Wall Street, drugs, insurance, oil, you can name them. The most powerful by far is the gun lobby. They literally order people how to vote. And they go after people, as Nikki knows, because she has stood up against them. They go after people and try to beat them if they dare to stand up for common sense gun safety measures. We have to end this. Your Attorney General has been a champion on this. We have to end this. One of my big differences with my opponent, voted against the Brady Bill 5 times, voted for some really unfortunate legislation like giving immunity to the gun makers and sellers. We need comprehensive background checks. We need to close the gun show loophole, close the online loophole, close what's called the Charleston loophole, and the immunity. And this is how absurd the gun lobby has become. We have what is called the no-fly list. People are on it because there's some evidence that they're somehow connected to terrorism. The gun lobby has basically ordered the Republicans not to pass a bill that would prohibit people on the no-fly list from buying a gun in America. Stop and think about that. They're so extreme right now that even somebody who might have terrorist connections can buy a gun. 92% of the American people disagree with their agenda and want to do what is common sense. 85% of gun owners agree with that. So I'm going to go and work as hard as I can to save lives, because that's what it comes down to for me. On average, 90 Americans a day die from gun violence. That's 33,000 people a year. We can't let this continue. So please join with me. When you vote tomorrow, I hope you'll vote for me because I will take this issue. And I'll tell you what, we also need to work on criminal justice reform and to end the era of passive incarceration. And we have to keep ourselves safe at home and defeat the terrorist threat, ISIS and the others. Because when you vote, you are voting not just for a president, you are voting for a commander-in-chief. I am very proud to have served as Secretary of State with President Obama. And we will continue to work to bring the world together around common goals, to try to defeat terrorism, to stand up to any nation or network that threatens the peace and stability of any region, because it has ramifications across the world. When I think about what the next president will face, I know there are a lot of challenges, but I am confident and optimistic we are up to meeting any one of them. I know together we can work to make sure we have our best days ahead of us in this country. When we can look at any young person and say, we're doing what we can to make sure you have the same opportunities as we did coming up. We're knocking down the barriers that stand in your way, whether it's economic, healthcare, education, systemic racism, or sexism, or prejudice against disability, or homophobia, or whatever it is. We're going to take it all on, because we are not a single-issue country. We are a country that is diverse and strong. I can't do any of this without your help. I can't do any of this. Now, I will go anywhere, anytime to find common ground with anybody. I will work with our great Democrats from this state, but I'll also work with Republicans to find that common ground, but I will also stand my ground. Because it's important to stand up for our values and our culture. But we've got to go back to solving problems again, my friends. We have to. That's who we are. Those folks who are their way or the highway, they don't represent what our founders understood would create the longest lasting democracy in the history of the world. They didn't doubt that there would be differences among us. That's kind of the American DNA. But what they did was to set up a system where we have to work together. And where those political voices who basically try to say you have to agree with me or else are being louder and louder, we need to say no. No. In a democracy, we work together. We don't always get our own way. You know, if I were grading some of those Republicans, you remember the little box that used to be on your kids' report cards? Play well with others. I'd have to put a big no. Democracy requires that we play well with others. That's what it's all about. So I need your help tomorrow. I need you not only to vote for me, but to get as many other people here. Great outcome in Massachusetts. And I want you to remember this. My goal is to make it possible for every person, and particularly every young person and every child, to live up to his or her God-given potential. It's not enough that my granddaughter will have opportunities. What kind of country will she become an adult in, and what kind of world will be out there waiting for her? I want every child to have the same opportunities to go as far as your